Curators, welcome back for episode 21 of the Yarn Curator podcast. My name is Naomi and welcome to my channel where I like to talk about primarily knitting and spinning in the fiber arts. If you're new to this channel, welcome. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. I'm always happy to have you guys here. And if you'd like to follow me on social media, I am the Yarn Curator on Instagram, and I am House of Cardigans on Ravelry. To start the episode, I just want to take a few minutes and address what's going on in America right now and where I stand on everything, because I think it's important for you guys to know how I feel and what I've been thinking. I know I've been pretty quiet on social media in general. I've posted a few things here or there. However, I'm pretty quiet as it is. I'm not the most active user on Instagram, and I barely use Facebook. I have been taking time since the social unrest started surrounding the death of George Floyd to really think and figure out exactly what it is that I want to say. This channel did not exist about 18 months ago when the diversity and inclusion surrounding, representation in the knitting community, when that was taking place, I hadn't yet started this channel. So first and foremost, I just want to say that I do support the Black Lives Matter movement. I think it's important to acknowledge that this country has a really hard history, and the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, all of that has lasting impacts that we still feel today, which has resulted in systemic racism, inequalities, particularly within our minority communities, and even more so apparent within the Black community within the US. I don't think systemic racism is solely a US problem. You can look to just about any country on earth that felt the effects of colonialism, and you can see that those legacies still persist to today. And newsflash, any country that pretty much wasn't the United States or Europe experienced colonialism. I want to say that I think it's really important for people to step back, listen, reflect on what's being said, and learn. Everyone comes to the table, to this movement, with different life experiences, comfort levels discussing this topic, learning styles, and everyone's going to be in a different lane on the path to creating a more equitable world. I've been thinking about is how I can lend my voice, my perspective as a historian and an educator to the conversation. And I have been really trying to find resources that I can share here on this channel that are digestible in talking about the history of oppression and racism in this country. So I'm going to link down below some articles and resources. One in particular that I want to point out is from a professional newsletter that I subscribe to called JSTOR. They're a digital library used primarily by academic historians as well as individuals of other subdisciplines. And they have a weekly digest or newsletter that they put out. And this week they linked to an article that includes a syllabus on the history of institutional racism. I'm going to link that down below. One of the articles and cases that I got particularly interested in as I started to go down the rabbit hole is on the history of a man named Dr. Ossian. He was an African-American doctor in the 1920s. He ultimately was accused of murder in 1925, 1926, And I'll link that article down below if you want to read it in its totality. But the short and simple version is he attempted to move into a home in Detroit in a more affluent neighborhood than what was relegated to African Americans at that time. As he tried to move into his house, it was surrounded by a mob of white people while the police watched, and they started to throw rocks into the home. He and the people who were helping him move into his house, there was 11 of them in total, kind of bunkered down in their home. On the second day of this climate ratcheting up and becoming more hostile, his brother fired a shotgun out of their home into the crowd, killing a white man. Now, everyone in the home, all 11 people, were charged with murder. The reason I'm going through all this is because I read this article which included an excerpt from his lawyer's closing arguments, and I want to read a quote from that because it really stood out, and I think the quote still resonates deeply, and it reads as follows. "You need not tell me you are not prejudiced. I know better. We are not very much but a bundle of prejudices anyhow. We are prejudiced against other people's color, prejudiced against other men's religions, prejudiced against other people's politics, prejudiced against people's looks, prejudiced about the way they dress. We are all full of prejudices." And those words were really striking because I think they still resonate today. And I want to go on and read just a little bit more of his closing remarks because there's a portion of it which I think also is still really relevant to today's conversations and attitudes towards race in this country. And he goes on to say, "Here were 11 colored men penned up in a house. Put yourself in their place. Make yourselves colored for a little while." And I just want to say, colored is a direct quote. I'm purely quoting from the source. "Make yourselves colored for a little while. It won't hurt. You can wash it off. They can't. But you can. Just make yourself black for a little while, long enough to judge them. Suppose you were black. Do you think you would forget about it even in your dreams? Or would you have black dreams? Suppose you had to watch every point of contact with your neighbor and remember your color, and you knew your children were growing up under this handicap. Do you suppose you would think of anything else? There was Dr. Sweet. A white man does pretty well when he does what Dr. Sweet did. A white boy who can start in life with nothing and put himself through college, study medicine, and take postgraduate work in Europe, earning every penny of it as he goes along, shoveling snow and coal and working as a bellhop on boats, working at every kind of employment that he can get to make his way, is some fellow. But Dr. Sweet has a handicap of the color of his face, and there is no handicap more terrible than that. Supposing you had a choice, right here in this minute, would you rather lose your eyesight or become colored? Would you rather lose your hearing or become a Negro? Would you rather go out in a street and have your leg cut off by a streetcar or have black skin? And really think about that. That's still a thought-provoking question to ask in today's day and age. And I think what's so important to take out of there is to put yourself in other people's shoes. While I'll never know what it's like to be Black in America, I do know what it feels like to be othered. Growing up as a non-traditional looking white person with an ethnic background in the South, I do know what it feels like to be othered or to feel like an other. So for me, that is a way to empathize with the Black experience. Like I said, I'll never know fully, but if you've ever been made to feel like an outsider, sit with that and then think about living with that your entire life. So one of the things that we do as historians and people who work in my field, which is public history, is to get individuals to think critically about the present by engaging with the past. So in order to understand our present, we really need to contextualize our past. And when you want to understand some of these equalities, you need to know the processes that were in place to prevent minorities from succeeding. And like I said, these are historical legacies that we still feel today. So I'm going to link down below 2 books as well as a couple YouTube videos. One of the books that I want to highlight is a book called Black Women, Rape and Resistance, A New History of the Civil Rights Movement, From Rosa Parks to the Rise of Black Power by Danielle McGuire. This is one of my favorite books I've ever read on the civil rights movement. It's probably the most powerful historical monograph I've ever read. As the title suggests, there is a trigger warning there because it does focus on the role that rape played in the experience of Black women in America. I feel like when we often talk about the civil rights movement, the role of Black women is often lost. And if you don't want to read the book in its full totality, the author, Dr. Danielle McGuire, has done a series of lectures in which she kind of covers the central thesis of the book. Those are available on YouTube. I'll link them down below as well if you're interested in learning at least, kind of a preliminary survey of that subject. Yeah, it's a really powerful book. It's been in my mind lately, not necessarily because of the history of rape in relationship to the killing of George Floyd, but because it highlighted, one of the central parts of the book is it highlights this pattern of court cases against white men who were accused of raping Black women, often teenagers and young girls who worked as domestic servants in white households. You see this pattern. Black women come forward, they make an allegation against a white man, often doesn't go to trial, and then you see that shift. Okay, they make accusations, now they're going to trial, but shocker, a white man being accused of a crime by a Black person in the South in the 1940s and 50s, it's going to get dismissed by a jury. However, you start to see this paradigm shift in the 60s in which the individuals fighting for civil rights and the civil rights movement starts to influence the court systems, and you start to see convictions. And there's a court case in the late 60s for, I can't remember her name, but it's in Tallahassee, Florida. And I keep wanting to say her name is Billie Jean King, but that's the tennis player. But her name is very similar to that. And she accuses a 25-year-old white man of rape and wins her court case against him, and he gets sentenced to life in prison. Now I'm bringing that up because I feel like with the long view of history, and unfortunately with the continued killing of Black individuals by police, you're starting to see a similar pattern emerge. At first, nothing happened. Then they're going to cases, to sealed grand juries, they get thrown out. I believe the Freddie Gray case was kind of a turning point in which you actually see cops being arrested and charges filed against them and them actually going to jury. I'm hopeful in the case of George Floyd that will actually result in convictions and will be another one of those watershed moments. I'm not holding my breath on it because history points that that's not likely to happen, unfortunately. I really do, though. I hope that George Floyd is a breaking point in America. I hope we're able to move forward and enact real change. I think police brutality and the militarization of the police is a pretty significant issue in US culture that has not been addressed. And just to round things out, where do we go from here? You guys, it's important. Whatever lane you choose, if you want to protest, if you want to repost on Instagram, do it to your heart's content. But I can't stress to you enough the importance of going out and voting. Go vote, use your voice, write your local representatives, call your senators, call your House representatives, because when we speak up, they pay attention. It's easy for them to ignore these issues when we are quiet and complacent. If you care and if you're passionate about the issues, find an organization. If they've got their shit together, they probably have a form letter that you can copy and paste and email your local representative about this issue. Every year when the budget cycle goes through the state of Florida, the Florida Association of Museums is spamming my inbox with a form letter that I can use to write my local representatives and let them know where I think they should put their dollars. In this case, the arts. And I do. So what does that result in? They say, hey, people care about this. We are or aren't going to fund this thing because we do or don't think people care about this thing. Write your legislators. And they don't even have to be at the state level. Write your local leaders. I have to say, one of the things I'm grateful to this pandemic for is I am super plugged in to my local government right now. Prior to this pandemic, I never once watched a local council meeting. I've watched over a dozen, and it's been eye-opening. It's been eye-opening seeing who's in charge of my local government. And that's all I'm going to say on that level. So while it might not seem like much, it does make a difference. Your voice is one, but it can be one of many. And please, please go vote in November and let the other side know where you stand. Go vote, y'all. It's important. People have died for the right to vote. It is your constitutional right, and it is your duty as a citizen to go and make your voice heard. It is your duty as a citizen to be informed. All right, so that is all I not want to say on that. That's all I am going to say on that today. And with that, I would like to move into the regular portion of this podcast. We'll start out with some finished objects. By some, I mean one. I just literally about an hour ago cast off my Trescao sweater. This is a pattern by Anna Dervout, also known as Avec Along Anna. And I knit mine out of Magpie fibers on her swanky sock base. It is an MCN blend, and I held it with one strand of mohair from my sister Zoe's shop, which is Felicity Yarn Studio. And the color ways I will list down below because they've escaped me at the moment. Y'all, I struggled with this project. It was a challenge. So the last time we spoke, I had divided the sleeves and I had knit all of one sleeve full length. You'll notice something here in a second when I put it on. So The eagle-eyed among you will notice something different from when I showed it last week, which is I had knit it and done full-length sleeves. My parents came for a visit. I knit the second sleeve, also full length. And then I said, you know what? I'm just gonna knit the body cropped till I run out of yarn. The folly of that was, by the time I finished knitting the sleeves, I only had about 50 grams total of yarn left over. And when I had knit all 50 grams of those for the body, it probably ended, I think it ended right about here, a lot closer to my true waist. And that was just a little too cropped for me. So then I said, oh, well, what I'll do is I'll just cut part of the sleeve and I'll knit it a little bit longer. And, you know, my sleeves will be about bracelet length. So I ripped back one sleeve till about a little bit past bracelet length, knowing I could steal from the second sleeve to even things out. Knit all 25 grams or whatever it was that I had ripped out, did the garter stitch detail in place of the ribbing, and it was still too short. So at this point, I was like, well, what do I do? I pulled out my Tanya and my Soldatna because those are my two other crop tops in my wardrobe. It was still shorter than Soldatna, which is probably the most cropped of them, and it's about as cropped as I'm willing to go with my body figure. So then I was like, all right, I'm just gonna have to deal with weaving in all the ends. I thought I was being smart. No, I wasn't. So I ended up knitting directly from the sleeve into my body till I got it to a length I wanted. Then I worked the garter stitch detail and bound off. I did do an I-cord bind off. I think it looks really neat and it's, you know, provides some nice stability to the sweater. So when I finished knitting the body, the sleeve was probably somewhere around here in length. So then I unpicked my second sleeve, I joined it to the other sleeve, and I knit till they looked about even. I stopped. How do I explain this? So if these are my two sleeves, if this is the sleeve I'm knitting from, I stopped when this sleeve was about here, knowing that I would have to unpick a portion of that sleeve to bring the ribbing up to there. So I stopped about 1.5 inches or so before I wanted the ribbing to start. So I ripped out that then I ripped out that 1 inch or so of extra stockinette and then worked it in the garter. So it was a lot of work, and I could have had this done like a week ago if I would have just knit the body alternating skeins till the size I wanted and then divided my remaining yarn and knit the two sleeves till they ended. Lesson learned. Lesson learned, you guys. It is all good. I haven't blocked it yet, so I do anticipate it growing a little bit. I have given it a little bit of a steam block when I was trying to figure out the appropriate length for the body. I did steam block it a little bit just to see where things roughly would go. And based on my experience with my Whitmore sweater that I finished, I do anticipate it growing about 1 inch in size. Overall, I'm really, really pleased with the pattern. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. I think it's really well written and it kind of just knits itself. If I had paid a little bit more attention at the beginning, I would have realized with the yarn I had picked out, I was going to be a little short on yardage. I didn't realize the Magpie fibers were closer to about 380 yards per skein, not the usual 4 to 450 you get with a lot of fingering weight yarns. And so I thought I could get away with 2 in my size, which is the 42-inch bust. It's all good. I like it. It kind of reminds me of the warm-up sweaters ballerinas wear, and I would kill to have a ballerina's body, but I think it's going to work really nice for winters here in Florida, as well as traveling in the fall and winter. And I say that because I really like to layer with my wardrobe. And so this works great with, I have a jumpsuit on right now, works great with that. It'll work great throwing it on over dresses and that sort of thing. So I really like it. I really like this sleeve length in general. And yeah, I'm really pleased. That is my finished object for the week. I only have one work in progress in terms of knitting to show you. And that is my Poet Sweater by Sari Nordland. It is living in a project bag gifted to me by my Aunt Laura, and her and my Aunt Mary recently started selling project bags. I will link their Etsy store below. And then there was a new yarn shop that just opened in Brooksville, North Carolina, Lord. There's a new yarn shop that just opened in Brooksville, Florida. It's called Pan Banged Knits. I haven't had a chance to scoot up there yet. I believe they have gone multiple times. They are also now selling their bags. They're called Fat Bottom bags, as you can see. And it's really cute. It's really sturdy. They started sewing and put me to shame in how they've just taken off with it. And I really like it. It's got this cute contrasting print, and it's perfect for putting a sweater's quantity within. So I got to give a little shout out to my aunties. So it is housing my project. I am knitting this out of Busches in the Turquoise colorway. I just joined my third ball of yarn to the sweater. And since I last showed it off on the podcast, I have worked about 1.5 repeats of the chart, which is pretty significant considering the chart is 50-something rows, 56 rows in total. So if you can see the unicorn stitch marker, that's where I was the last time I showed this off on the podcast. While I had my iron out and while I was steam blocking, I gave this a nice little steam block because it was really gratifying to see the lace panel come out in greater detail. So hopefully you guys can see that. And yeah, I'm really pleased with it. I texted Zoe and said, I was like, holy crap, I think I finally cracked this pattern. I found it immensely challenging at the beginning. And if I just take the chart line by line, I can work on it while TV's on in the background. And if my husband and I aren't having a super in-depth conversation, I can usually work on it. Or if we're just watching TV and kind of chit-chatting about a show, I can work on it, but it still does require a significant amount of brain power. I think I need to work one more full repeat of the chart, and then I can start the ribbing for the bottom of the sweater. I might even be able to get away with doing half a repeat because this is, I'd say that's probably close to 8 or so inches. And once it grows with blocking, it'll be a little bit longer, but I think one more chart repeat and we should be good to go. Last Monday when I worked on this, I did about a little over half of one of the chart repeats while my husband was at work and I was home on my day off. I'm excited. I'm super excited. This and this are really motivating me to kind of clear my needles of some old whips, and then I can cast on all of the new things. I did cake up some yarn the other day before having a catastrophic fail with my Swift. Have not casted the project on yet because that yarn is in timeout still. Still have hard feelings towards it. That is it for knitting. I have been, like I said, I've been feeling the need to clear out things that have just been lingering. and I just want to kind of start things over with a clean slate in terms of knitting and spinning, but I don't feel like I can do that till I clear the needles and clear the bobbins. I have been doing a few different things. One is I finished spinning some John Arbin that I started. So this is his Viola top. It's 100 grams and it is in the Shepherd's Warning colorway. So I just pulled this off the bobbin, and how I spun this was primarily a short forward draw, and I treated the fiber treated is a strong word, two different ways, but I split it in half, and half of the roving I just spun straight from the top, and I let the color blend as it did, and it produced a much more vibrant single. The second 50 grams I ran through my drum carder and really blended the colors together, which created a much more muted singles. I think they play really nicely off of one another in the yarn, and this in total is about 150 yards. I was trying to spin a fingering weight. I think it's probably closer to a heavy sport DK. I haven't wrapped it around whatever those things are called, my control card yet. And I have not yet soaked or snapped this, but it seems pretty well balanced. I just need to tie it off so I can give it a bath. And that was the two singles spun together. This is the second bobbin, which I haven't pulled off yet, is what was left over on the first bobbin, which is the one that I spun directly from the top. And I just made a center pool ball and did a 2-ply together from there. Originally I was thinking I would make the center pool ball and join it to this skein, but I mean, it's not a huge difference in how those look against one another, but this one is just a little bit more punchy than the other. And I have to say this spin in general has been really fun because this is the same colorway from John Arbin, just milled on his DK base. And so you can see they're pretty close, but since I didn't really blend those colors together, you know, you could see the full depth of colors that are blended to create kind of this mauvey, grapey purple. So you get hints of blues and reds and whites in here. It's kind of a faded Americana feel, whereas this you get much more the solid color, and then, you know, even more so on this second bobbin here. It's been fun. I mean, you definitely, when you really study this, you can see specks of blue and that kind of cranberry color in here. So that's been really fun. When I ordered that John Arbin fiber, I bought a lot. I bought a lot of fiber from John Arbin. So I ordered 200 grams of this colorway called Indigo Dust. Zoe is probably mad at me for not sending her 100 grams, but sorry. I think I ordered 100 initially, and then I ordered a second 100 because I have a plan for this. So anyways, I have spun the first 100 grams of this fiber. Really enjoyed it. It's primarily a black with a blue-green fiber blended with it. When the light hits it, it's kind of that, not translucent, that iridescent green that you get off of peacock feathers. It really reminds me of Slytherin colors from Harry Potter, particularly in Deathly Hallows when Harry gets attacked by one of the Snatchers and he's describing the Slytherin common room, and part of what he describes is the color of the lake in which the common room is underneath that. For some reason, this color reminds me of that. The finished yarn I would like to be a heavy fingering sport weight. I'm thinking it's probably going to turn out closer to a DK. And I spun this using a modified version of the long draw that is not a proper long draw. If any of you watch Sarah's podcast, which is Crafting with Compassion, she did a tutorial about a week ago on how to spin long draw. Sarah, my dear, I tried it, and what I was doing was nowhere close to what you were doing. So the way Sarah teaches it is you keep your hand positioned at the front of your orifice, and then you draft your fiber back while letting in twist periodically into the yarn. What I was doing was I had my death grip, as I normally do, on my drafting hand, and then in a synchronized movement I would pinch and let in twist as I moved both back in synchronization, and then I would feed into my wheel. So it was a lot of this, sometimes at dramatic distances, and then into the wheel. It is a lot faster, well, probably not as coordinated than the short forward draw, which I did find myself defaulting to. I'm trying to learn, but yeah, it was this motion as opposed to this motion. Y'all, some spam account just tried to call me while I was describing synchronized drafting. So anyways, yes, I was watching Sarah and doing something completely different. But anyways, there is more than one way to spin a yarn. That is for sure. But yeah, I was really kind of chuckling on the inside while working on this, but I really enjoy it. And then two other spinning projects have been lingering for far too long. One of those you will see right here. This is fiber that I purchased from Spindlework Designs back in December. And I believe the colorway is called like a unicorn tail. And it's about 200 yards, probably about a DK weight. Once again, I still haven't put it on the control card. And I just split the fiber in half and spun from the top. I tend to not think too deeply about my hand spun. I just create whatever the yarn wants to be, whatever it tells me at that moment in time. So when I initially spun this first single, I wasn't crazy about the colors. They're very baby pink and baby blue. I do like the finished yarn a lot better now that it's plied together. Some of the blue and pink marled around each other, which kind of creates more of a purpley color. I love the texture of it. It's a nice plump 2-ply. It's really soft and squishy, and it is going to go in my hand spun bucket till I figure out what to do with it. I do think some of these yarns that are really kind of mottled in their color, dapple colors, I think they'd be really pretty in that new Stephen West shawl that came out that looks like almost like a stained glass window tile mosaic. I think it's called the Fantastitch shawl. I could be wrong. I'll link it down below. I think a variety of hand spuns, like I said, with this kind of mottled, dappled color play could be really pretty against a nice contrast color. And last but not least, and I don't have it with me and it's not that exciting, so I'm not going to show it, but I'm just going to mention briefly, I have been trying to give myself the kick in the ass that I need to finish prepping and processing the fleece that I purchased last summer from Camille, who is an adorable little Shetland living somewhere near Asheville, North Carolina. I have it washed, I've picked most of it, and I've probably run about half of the fleece through my drum carder to make a series of bats. And I should probably just start spinning it, just to start making something out of it. I kind of really want to make the new shawl that Larke of the Fiber Tales podcast came out with about a month or two ago. I think I'd make a really nice shawl, and the only hesitation I have, and for those of you who are more experienced spinners than myself, I've never spun Shetland before, but I also don't think I've ever knit it, so I don't know how soft to expect it to be next to my skin. I do have slightly sensitive skin, nothing too crazy. I mean, I can handle a bit of prickle, but I do break out in hives, like when I get bit by mosquitoes. Not that wearing a sheep's fleece is the same as getting bit by mosquitoes, but if that gives you an idea of the sensitivity level. Anyways, for those of you who are more experienced knitters or spinners, let me know some of the properties of Shetland down below and tips for spinning it, and if that would be an appropriate use of that hand spun for that project. That does it for today's kind of knitting, making content information. I feel like I have talked long enough as it is, so I'm just gonna say over the last 2 weeks, I have returned to my workplace. We are prepping the museum for our eventual reopening. We still have no news from leadership on what our reopen date is. And we have a phased plan that we've been working on since April anyways. So we'll see. I spent 2 weeks ago when I first went back, I spent most of an entire week rearranging one of our galleries. And that was it was a lot of work because it had at least 10 display cases in it, and they were jammed packed full of a lot of breakables. And we had to create a new floor plan for the gallery so people can really spread out in distance in there. Thank God our permanent gallery is going to be closed for the foreseeable future, because I can't even begin to imagine reimagining that space. It has 2 historic vehicles in it, and they're not ideally placed as it is. It also has a print shop and a giant alligator's mouth and a old sponge diving uniform suspended from the ceiling. I'm making it sound a lot nicer than it is. It's visually cool when you walk in. The exhibit itself does need to be refreshed. I am just not ready to tackle it yet. So aside from that, I have been working on finishing some different exhibition scripts. I have been having conversations with my coworkers surrounding racism, diversity, and inclusion, the narrative we have at the museum. It is one of our overarching goals within our strategic plan to include more diverse narratives at my work, and so we're kind of pushing that goal a little bit higher up the priority list. I work on a small staff of 5, and we cover 21 acres. We have close to 30 historic structures, so things often go up and down the list based on needs. However, since we are still closed to the public, we are able to address some things that don't always get the attention they deserve when they deserve it, because it's a constant struggle to put out fires. So while there are no fires, some of those things that have been lingering get to move up the priority list. So that's work and life and home. Other than that, it's a lot of the same old, same old. We were home buddies before the pandemic. We're going to be home buddies after the pandemic. So yeah, I do need to draw a winner still for the 300 subscriber giveaway. So I'm going to do that in my next video. So if this is your first time watching or your first time with this space, go back to my last episode, find the prompt. It's in the beginning. You don't have to watch for long. Leave a comment down below, and I will draw a winner by the next time that I record. So until then, you guys, I hope you stay healthy, strong, use your voice, and go vote. I will talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye.